The legend of the hollow path had always been the province of hushed voices and firelit tales. In the small, forgotten pockets of Black Ridge, where every rustle of wind and snap of twig might be the prelude to something unseen, the story was passed down from one generation to the next. It was said that when the rain fell in relentless torrents, and the mist rolled in thick as wool, an ancient trail would emerge from the forest floor. A trail that defied maps, reason, and the safe return of any who dared to venture down it. For many it was a bedtime story meant to keep children awake. For others it was a curse whispered in the dim corners of isolated diners and creaking homes. And for one restless soul, it was a truth too terrible to ignore. Eric's earliest recollections were steeped in the glow of campfires and the thrill of youthful dares. At 15, his nights were filled with laughter, shared secrets, and a lingering fascination with the macabre. One such night, as the autumn wind rattled the window panes of his modest home, his best friend Caleb had spun the tale of the hollow path with a glint in his eye. Caleb. Legend has it that somewhere deep in Black Ridge Forest lies a trail that isn't meant for mortal footsteps. They say it only appears after days of unyielding rain, when the mist curls around the trunks like spirits come to claim their due. Eric had listened wide-eyed as the fire crackled and shadows danced around them. The idea of a path that swallowed people whole was both horrifying and irresistible. For Caleb, the thrill of testing fate was a daily impulse. For Eric, it was the spark of curiosity that would one day ignite a journey he could never have predicted. That night, amidst the chorus of nocturnal sounds and the soft murmur of the forest, Caleb had declared, "Someday, I'm gonna find it." And somewhere between the laughter and the whispered warnings of older kids, the seeds of an obsession were sown. But as the years passed and childhood receded into memory, the hollow path became a spectral tale, a relic of youthful imaginations and campfire myths. That is, until the day a single message shattered Eric's carefully constructed normalcy. "15 years after those long-ago campfire nights, Eric found himself returning to Black Ridge, a place he had once desperately wanted to escape. The town, worn by time and isolation, had not changed much. Its streets were quiet, its faces etched with the lines of hardship and secrets, best left unsaid. Yet beneath its faded storefronts and weathered signs, an undercurrent of unease still lingered. Eric's life had become a series of busy routines and half-forgotten dreams. He had left Black Ridge after Caleb's mysterious disappearance, an event that had left him haunted and guilty in equal measure. Caleb had always been the daring one, and while his own path had been one of cautious retreat, the memory of his friend's vanished presence had never truly faded. Then, one ordinary afternoon, while sifting through a pile of old emails on his laptop, Eric's heart skipped a beat. There, among a dozen newsletters and work memos, was a new message. There was no sender, no subject line, just a single attachment. With trepidation, he clicked. The image that appeared on his screen was grainy, its pixels telling a story of neglect and decay. In the dim light of his study, Eric recognized the unmistakable figure of Caleb, a boy frozen in time, standing at the threshold of a narrow trail deep in the forest. The windbreaker, the unruly brown hair, it was as if nothing had changed. Below the picture was a single, chilling command Follow the path. For a long agonizing moment, Eric sat there, paralyzed by disbelief and dread. Had someone orchestrated a cruel hoax, or was it a desperate plea from beyond? The question clawed at him, mingling with memories of nights spent huddled around flickering campfires and the insistent pull of an unsolved mystery. It was then that Eric realized that the hollow path was more than just a tale. It was a summons, a call to confront the unknown. With a mix of dread and determination, he decided he had to return. The day of his return was marked by a chill that crept under his skin, as if nature itself was warning him away. Eric's car wound its way down a forgotten country road, past fields that had long surrendered to the silence of disuse. The closer he got to Black Ridge, the heavier the air seemed to become, a tangible reminder of lost time and buried secrets. Arriving in town, Eric was struck by how little had changed, yet everything felt alien. The once bustling main street was now a quiet byway, lined with shuttered windows and fading advertisements. The diner, a relic of better days, still operated with a skeleton crew of elderly patrons who regarded him with a mix of pity and caution. At the counter, he sought answers. Eric. Hey. Maureen, do you remember the hollow path? Maureen. That trail ain't for folks like us, Eric. It don't lead where you want it to. Sometimes some things are better left alone. But for Eric, the seed of curiosity had grown into a desperate need for closure. That night, with his old backpack slung over his shoulder and the weight of unanswered questions on his mind, he set out towards the forest. The forest was a different world from the open fields of his youth. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their thick canopies blotting out the sky. Every step further into the darkened wood felt like stepping back in time, and yet also into a realm that defied the natural order. As dusk gave way to night, the forest transformed. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves mingled with an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle or the distant hoot of an owl. Eric's flashlight carved narrow swath through the darkness, illuminating patches of twisted roots and gnarled branches that seemed to reach out like grasping fingers. He wasn't alone. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard a faint, rhythmic sound, a heartbeat perhaps, or the whisper of unseen footsteps. The deeper he ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around him, as if it were alive and aware of his presence. Hours seemed to slip by as Eric wandered deeper into Black Ridge Forest. Every rustle, every shifting shadow amplified his growing paranoia. The ancient trees bore witness to countless seasons, yet tonight they seemed to murmur with secrets. The forest floor was littered with memories, fallen leaves, broken twigs, and the faint traces of footprints that had long since been reclaimed by nature. As Eric pressed on, his thoughts drifted back to his childhood. He remembered how Caleb would dare him to venture closer to the rumored edge of the hollow path. At the time, Eric had laughed it off, a mix of youthful bravado and fear masking the truth. Now the line between legend and reality blurred with each step. In a small clearing, bathed in the ghostly light of a half-hidden moon, Eric paused. The air here was colder, and the silence was broken by a sound that made his blood run cold. A low, almost imperceptible whisper that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. His pulse quickened as he scanned the darkness for its source, but found nothing save for the dense, impenetrable mist that was beginning to gather. "Eric, hello?" The word died in the stillness, swallowed by the heavy fog that began to roll in. For a moment he considered turning back, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. With a deep breath he moved forward, his every sense on high alert. The forest, with its labyrinth of twisted paths and shifting lights, was both beautiful and cruel. Every crack of a twig underfoot sent shivers down his spine. At times it felt as though the trees themselves were conspiring against him, their ancient bark etched with the memories of those who had disappeared along this cursed trail. Hours passed, or was it minutes? Time had lost its meaning. Eric's mind, already frayed by the isolation and darkness, began to unravel. He started to hear things that weren't there. A soft laugh in the distance, the gentle murmur of voices that he couldn't quite discern. Each sound was a ghostly echo, a reminder of the past he had tried so hard to escape. Then, in the heart of the forest, he came upon a relic of a time long forgotten. A crumbling stone wall, half swallowed by ivy and moss. Its surface was inscribed with cryptic symbols and weathered letters. Eric's hand trembled as he traced the faded script, which read, "To tread is to be bound. To look is to be lost." The ominous words sent a chill through him. They felt like a warning, a final plea from a forgotten soul. Night deepened, and the forest seemed to come alive with an almost malevolent energy. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around Eric like a shroud, obscuring the path ahead. Every sense screamed at him to turn back, yet something deep inside compelled him to press forward. He recalled Caleb's last words from long ago, muttered during one of their reckless midnight escapades, about the path that called out to those brave enough to face their inner demons. Now those words resonated in the pit of his stomach. The hollow path was not merely a physical route through the forest, it was a journey into the labyrinth of the soul, where every fear, every regret was laid bare. As Eric continued, the forest transformed yet again. The trees, once mere silent sentinels, now appeared as distorted, tormented figures. Their limbs seemed to writhe and twist in the peripheral vision, vanishing when he tried to focus. The ground beneath him pulsed as if it had a heartbeat, and every step felt like a descent into madness. Memories of his past began to materialize in the shifting mist. He saw visions of his childhood, the carefree laughter with Caleb echoing in the distance, now overlaid with a disquieting undercurrent of sorrow and loss. Faces from his past, friends, family, even strangers, seemed to emerge from the fog, their eyes filled with unspoken questions. At one point, he thought he saw his mother's gentle smile, only to have it twist into a mask of despair before vanishing into the darkness. In the midst of these apparitions, a familiar sound reached him, a soft, deliberate tapping like footsteps on wet leaves. He paused, his breath catching in his throat, and strained to hear. The sound grew louder as though drawing closer. Was it just his imagination, or was someone or something following him? With no other option but to continue, Eric clutched his flashlight tightly and moved toward the source of the sound. The mist swallowed him whole, reducing his world to a sphere of ghostly light and impenetrable darkness. Every step was laden with uncertainty, every movement a gamble between escape and surrender. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the footsteps ceased. The forest fell eerily silent. In the heavy stillness, Eric could almost hear his own heartbeat, a lonely drum echoing through the void. The path narrowed, twisting into an almost circular formation that led to a small clearing. Here the air was impossibly still. In the center of the clearing stood a weathered wooden bench, its surface scarred by time and neglect. It was as if the bench had been waiting for him, a silent witness to countless tragedies. Eric approached slowly, each step measured and heavy with dread. As he neared, the temperature dropped sharply and the sound of his breathing seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. He sat on the bench, its rough wood biting into his skin, and let the moment wash over him. It was then that a soft voice, barely a whisper, reached his ears. "Caleb, V.O. You've come back, Eric? Eric? Caleb?" Eric's voice trembled. He strained his eyes, searching the darkness for the source. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged. At first it was indistinct, a wisp of fog that took on the shape of a man. Then, as the figure drew nearer, the features became clear. It was Caleb, but not the Caleb Eric remembered. This Caleb was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his skin a pallid canvas that betrayed the passage of time and something far worse. His smile, once mischievous and full of life, was now stretched thin and marred by a deep, unspoken agony. "Caleb, V.O. I've been waiting for you. You were always meant to come back." Eric's mind raced, a tumult of emotions, relief, horror, and an overwhelming sadness for the friend he'd lost so many years ago. "Eric, what happened to you?" "Caleb, V.O. The hollow path takes those who are lost and binds them to it. I went in looking for something, for escape. Instead, I found myself." His hand reached out as if to touch Eric's face, and for a moment, the contact was electric, a jolt of shared pain and memories. As Caleb spoke, the clearing began to change. The darkness deepened, and the trees around them seemed to lean in, their branches like skeletal fingers closing in. The air pulsed with an almost palpable tension, as if the forest itself were aware of their confrontation. "Caleb, V.O. You must understand, Eric, the path reveals who we truly are. It shows us the parts of ourselves we hide from, the regrets we bury deep, and the fears we refuse to face. I thought I could escape them, but the path had other plans. Eric, I don't understand. Why did you let it take you? Caleb, V.O. I wasn't strong enough. I believed I could outsmart it, escape it by confronting my fears head on. But the path, it changes you. It feeds on your pain, your memories, and it never lets you go." The forest around them pulsed with a low hum, a sound that grew louder, as if resonating with the very heartbeat of the earth. Eric could feel his own pulse quickening in response, each beat echoing the inevitability of what was to come. In that moment, the clearing transformed into a stage for a ritual of the lost. Shapes began to materialize in the fog, a series of spectral figures, their faces indistinct, yet filled with a sorrow that transcended time. They drifted around Eric and Caleb, silent witnesses to the reunion of old friends and the inevitable decay of the human soul. "Eric, Caleb, can I help you? Is there any way to—" Before he could finish, the fog thickened, obscuring the figures, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. A deep, resonant sound like the groaning of the earth itself filled the space. The wooden bench splintered under an unseen force, and the spectral figures converged into a swirling vortex of mist. and memories. Caleb, VO. You must come with me. There's a truth you need to face. A truth that binds us both. Eric, though terrified, felt an inexplicable pull, an irresistible urge to follow his old friend, even if it meant surrendering to the same fate. With each step, the clearing seemed to collapse in on itself, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurring. Spectral figures whispered secrets of lost hopes and forgotten sins, their voices overlapping in a mournful chorus. Eric's mind raced as he followed Caleb deeper into the unknown. The forest had transformed completely now, a surreal landscape of shifting shadows, pulsating mists, and echoes of a life long past. Every step felt like a step away from the world he once knew, deeper into a realm where time and memory merged. The path wound on interminably, a narrow ribbon of earth lit by the eerie glow of bioluminescent fungi and the faint reflection of a ghostly moon. The temperature plummeted, and Eric's breath came in invisible puffs, each exhalation a reminder of the unnatural chill that enveloped him. Along the way, the path revealed remnants of lives that had once dared to dream. In a clearing overgrown with tangled vines, Eric stumbled upon a rusted, abandoned car, its windows shattered and its interior reclaimed by ivy. Inside, scattered personal items, a faded photograph, a diary with brittle pages, a child's toy spoke of lives interrupted. It was as though the forest had collected these relics, each a silent testimony to those who had ventured too far. Eric's own memories surfaced unbidden. The warm laughter of a long-lost friend, the tender embrace of a love that had faded, and the quiet despair of unfulfilled dreams. The path seemed to mirror his inner turmoil, drawing him into a vortex of regrets and fears. Caleb, VO. Do you remember this place? I used to come here when I felt trapped. I thought if I could just see everything laid out, maybe I could fix it all. Eric, and did you? Caleb, VO. No, Eric. The path doesn't give you closure. It takes it. It leaves you with the raw pain of what was and the emptiness of what will never be. The air grew heavy with unspoken words, and the forest around them seemed to mourn. The swirling mists carried voices, echoes of laughter, cries of anguish, the rustle of long-forgotten conversations. Each sound was a reminder of the inevitable loss that had claimed so many lives along the hollow path. As the night deepened, so did Eric's descent into psychological torment. The world he knew, clear, ordered, and safe, had been replaced by a labyrinth of dark corridors and shifting realities. The line between the external horror of the forest and the internal horror of his own mind blurred until they became one. Every step forward was a journey into his own hidden recesses. The secrets he'd buried, the pain he'd tried to forget, faces of lost loved ones emerged from the mist, each one carrying a silent accusation. At one point, Eric found himself in a clearing where the ground was littered with old photographs, each one capturing a moment of joy, now tainted by loss. He knelt to pick one up, a sepia-toned image of a smiling family, their eyes bright with hope. But as he stared, the faces in the photograph began to distort, the smiles twisting into expressions of sorrow and dread. A single tear rolled down his cheek as he whispered, "I'm sorry," as if apologizing for something he could not name. Caleb, VO. It's not just the forest. It's everything inside you. The regret, the guilt, the longing for something you can never have back. The hollow path forces you to confront it all. Eric's inner turmoil churned like a storm, every memory and regret amplified 100-fold. The mists around him began to take on shapes of their own, monstrous visages that seemed to leer at him, their mouths open in silent screams. The forest, it seemed, was alive with his own personal demons. In one harrowing moment, as he stumbled over a gnarled root, Eric saw a vision of his younger self, a frightened, wide-eyed boy clutching a flashlight. Young Eric, V.O. Don't you see? This is your truth. You cannot escape yourself. Tears mingled with the sweat on Eric's brow as he realized that every step he took was a confrontation with the self he had long denied. A self filled with sorrow, guilt, and a yearning for redemption. The forest became a mirror, reflecting the parts of him he had tried to hide away, and the hollow path was the only way to make peace with those fragments. The journey eventually led Eric and Caleb to a secluded glade encircled by ancient oak trees whose gnarled roots formed a natural amphitheater. In the center of the glade stood a stone altar covered in lichen and etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. It was here that the forest seemed to pause, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Caleb, V.O. This is where it all converges, where the past and the present, the living and the dead, merge into one. Here you face the truth of the hollow path and of yourself. Eric stepped forward, his heart pounding. The altar exuded an aura of both ancient power and tragic sorrow. He felt drawn to it, compelled by a force that transcended logic. As he ran his fingers along the cold stone, the symbols seemed to pulse with life, as if they were recording his very essence. The ground beneath the altar began to tremble, and from the crevices emerged flickering images. Snapshots of lives lost, of moments frozen in time. He saw glimpses of Caleb's own descent, a series of disjointed images of a boy who once laughed in the sunlight, now transformed into a specter of despair. He saw faces from his own past, friends, lovers, family, all intertwined with the fate of the forest. A low chant began to emanate from the darkness beyond the glade, a chorus of voices that blended grief, longing, and a terrible beauty. Chorus V.O. Remember, remember, they intoned, as if invoking the souls of those who had been consumed by the hollow path. In that moment, Eric felt the weight of all his lost years. Every regret, every unspoken apology, and every forgotten dream surged forward. The altar was not just a relic. It was a repository of every human heartache that had ever been left unresolved. The ritual of remembrance had begun, and Eric was now a participant unwillingly bound to its cycle. Caleb, V.O. You must choose, Eric. Embrace the path and all that it reveals, or turn away and forever be haunted by the specters of your past. Eric's mind reeled. The choice was not merely a decision between two paths. It was a confrontation with the deepest parts of his soul. In the silence that followed, he closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. The agony of loss, the sting of regret, the bittersweet yearning for what might have been all converged into a single moment of clarity. He opened his eyes, now filled with the resolve of one who has faced the darkest corridors of his own heart. Eric, I choose to remember. In response, the altar symbols flared with an intense light, and the stone itself seemed to vibrate with an energy that defied description. The chanting voices reached a crescendo, then fell silent as the glade was bathed in an otherworldly glow. For a moment, The boundaries between the living and the dead, the past and the present dissolved entirely. In that transcendent moment, Eric felt a transformation begin. It was as if the very essence of the hollow path was seeping into his being, filling the void left by years of unspoken sorrow and regret. The pain of the past, once a burden, became the catalyst for his metamorphosis. Caleb, V.O. We are bound to this path, Eric, but perhaps there is a way to harness it. Use it to heal, even if only a little. The forest around them seemed to pause in reverence. The ancient oaks and tangled undergrowth, the ghostly apparitions and whispered voices all bore witness to the sacred ritual unfolding in that forgotten glade. Eric felt as though he were being reborn into a realm where every sorrow had its place, every regret its purpose. The hollow path was no longer just a curse. It was a mirror reflecting the depths of human existence. Yet even as the transformation began, a deep, unsettling awareness crept into Eric's consciousness. He knew that the path demanded a price. The light that now filled the glade was as much a herald of hope as it was a harbinger of inevitable loss. To truly embrace the hollow path was to accept that one could never again walk among the living as before. It was a surrender, a union with the darkness that lay beneath the surface of every human heart. As the light slowly dimmed, the glade returned to its natural state, a place of muted colors and haunting stillness. But something fundamental had changed within Eric. He no longer felt the acute, piercing isolation of his past. Instead, he sensed a strange kinship with the sorrowful memories that had plagued him for so long. Caleb, V.O. Your choice has bound you to the hollow path in a way that is both beautiful and tragic. You carry the weight of remembrance now, but also the possibility of redemption. Eric, I understand there is no escape from who we are, no matter how far we run. I choose to face it, to live with the memories, rather than be consumed by them. In the days that followed the ritual, Eric found himself in a liminal space, caught between the world he had once known and the shadowy realm of the hollow path. The forest, which had served as both a crucible and a sanctuary, now seemed to pulsate with the echoes of his transformation. Even as he attempted to return to the semblance of normal life in Black Ridge, the memories of that night and the voices of the forgotten lingered at the edge of his consciousness. He began to document his experiences in a battered journal. Each entry was a raw, unfiltered glimpse into his soul, a record of dreams and nightmares that bled into one another. The lines between reality and hallucination blurred as the journal filled with cryptic notes and fragmented poetry, all echoing the refrain. Remember, remember, friends and acquaintances noticed a change in Eric. Where once he had been reserved and haunted by unspoken grief, he now carried an aura of quiet acceptance, a resignation to the idea that some truths were too terrible, yet too necessary to ever truly let go. He spoke less of his past, yet more of the wisdom gleaned from embracing every shadow within himself. But the transformation was not without consequence. In moments of solitude, Eric could still hear the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the ritual, a lingering echo of the voices that had filled the glade. It was a reminder that while he might attempt to reintegrate with the world of the living, a part of him would forever belong to the forest and the spectral memory of the hollow path, Late at night, when the darkness pressed against his windows and the world outside fell silent, Eric would awake in a cold sweat, haunted by dreams of that fateful night. In his dreams, he wandered the endless corridors of the forest, each step drawing him further away from reality and closer to an uncharted realm where time, lost meaning, and sorrow reigned supreme. There in the dreamscape, he would meet spectral versions of those he loved and of those he had lost, each interaction a reflection of the choices he had made. Yet, in these moments of terror, there was also a strange comfort. The hollow path had become not only a harbinger of loss, but also a wellspring of understanding. For in confronting his own darkness, Eric discovered that the memories he feared were not merely chains, but stepping stones to a deeper awareness of life's ephemeral beauty. One week after his return from the depths of Blackridge Forest, something unexpected occurred. As Eric sat at his desk, the gentle hum of his computer filled the silence of his study. An unfamiliar email notification blinked on his screen. No subject, no sender, only an attachment. Hesitating for only a moment, he clicked. The image that appeared was of himself, standing at the edge of a mist-covered trail. His eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and resignation, stared back at him, and beneath the image was a single, stark line. Follow the path. A chill swept over him, and in that instant, Eric knew that the call of the hollow path was not yet finished. It was as if the forest, its memories, its ghosts, that had found a new way to reach out to remind him that some journeys never truly end. The email, cryptic and unsettling, was a final, ambiguous message, a link between the man he had been and the man he had become. It was a reminder that every step down the hollow path was both a farewell and a beckoning, an invitation to continue confronting the truths buried in the dark recesses of the human soul. With the email's arrival, Eric realized that his transformation was complete. He could never return fully to the mundane world he once knew. He was now irrevocably intertwined with the memories of the forest, with the voices of those lost along the way. In the ensuing days, Eric's demeanor grew even more introspective. He began to frequent the outskirts of Blackridge again, not as a desperate escape, but as a pilgrimage to the heart of the mystery that had changed him forever. At night, he would sometimes catch a glimpse of a familiar figure in the mist, a flash of a blue windbreaker, or the glint of a knowing smile. Whether it was Caleb's ghost or a figment of his imagination, Eric could no longer tell. The boundary between life and legend had blurred completely. Years later, the legend of the Hollow Path continues to haunt Blackridge. Locals whisper of a man who wanders the forest at night, a man whose eyes reflect the sorrow and beauty of a life lived in perpetual remembrance. Some say he is a guardian of the past, a keeper of secrets too painful to forget. Others claim he is a warning to those who dare to seek the truth behind the veil of normalcy. For Eric, the journey is unending. Each day he carries the weight of his memories, both joyful and tragic, knowing that every step he takes is a step further into the labyrinth of his own soul. The email with the chilling command remains on his computer, a constant reminder that the hollow path never truly relinquishes its hold on those who have once walked it. As the seasons change and the forest endures, so too does Eric's inner transformation. The line between pain and healing, loss and acceptance has become indistinguishable. He lives with the understanding that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but rather experienced and remembered. And so, beneath the ancient boughs of Black Ridge, where every shadow whispers a secret and every gust of wind carries a memory, the hollow path endures, a timeless, haunting reminder that to truly live is to embrace both the light and the darkness within.